All right, so video is not showing for whatever reason, but that does not matter. It's apparently recording. So that's good. So sound is good, then we can rock. So with that being said, this year we're gonna go over um, the same old as we did last year, the 2024 offseason game plan. Last year, the theme of last year was definitely allocating the correct funds to this roster. Ryan Tannehill was the guy that you definitely needed to um, assess his contract. And if you would have done that earlier, it would have allocated funds towards building the team. So that was last year, and a multitude of players. You guys can go and find that video, but a multitude of players that I would have either drafted or signed would have helped this team. Literally every problem that the Tennessee Titans went through last year was solved in my offseason game plan had they attacked it the way that I would have myself. So, and a lot of people might say that and be like, oh, another person, couch potato, blah blah blah, or GM, couch GM, whatever the haters say. But that's 100% what happened. It's me doing these game plans for 6 7 years and being able to find the proper way to build this team, not just in the present moment but also looking ahead. And I've sent my work to countless different football analytical simulations, and out of the last 6 years I've won two analytically acclaimed Super Bowls. So with that being said, I'm doing something right. So um, last year answered a lot of questions. It really was based off of were the Titans going to rebuild or try to run it back. They chose to run it back. So with this year, it's been already reported and already spoken about with Rand Carthon being this is his official first draft, right? So there is no outside influence of Vrabel possibly had more of the control with the personnel decisions, or half the draft was his, a few picks was his. It's 100%. They've definitely created that narrative and pushed what they want to be as a collaborative group. So this draft, this offseason, what they were able to do is there shouldn't be any excuses. It was 100% collaboration, and now we are able to put a name, Rand Carthon, to these selections. So start off on some of the moves that I agreed with or was similar. Um, Lord Cushenberry the third, 100% number one guy on my board to get at a position of need, and not just a position of need. It's the guy, it's the player. And if you look at the historical context, I think he is 100% a Kevin Mawai, Ben Jones type of signing. So that's where we were. That's where we agree on. Mason Rudolph, another player. And when you look at the market of backup quarterbacks, I think he's a fit here. I think there's familiarity from Bill Callahan being in the AFC North and Mason Rudolph coming from the Steelers. But I've been a big fan of Mason Rudolph since he came out from Oklahoma State in 2018. So been wanting him on the Titans for a long time. The guy is probably throws one of the best deep balls in the league. Um, Super smart, can run an offense, can step in a pinch and win you some games, and he did that last year for the Steelers. Other moves, they might not have been exactly where I would have gone, but they're like top three, top six of moves that I would have done, whether it be trading for L'Jarius Sneed, whether it be Chidobe Awuzie, whether it be Tony Pollard. Very similar in terms of my top five of my free agent list. So they were very close. And usually when the Titans do that, the season coming, the upcoming season is usually really good. So, and then we'll get to the draft, but throughout my game plan, one of my biggest things was this year, you're going to have to get guys at certain positions that you really like and really invest in them long term, because this is something I didn't always do, but I've started to peek a little ahead to the 2025 free agent class, peek a little ahead to the 2025 draft class, and then maybe a little bit beyond, but usually the next year. And when you look at that, it's a top heavy class at wide receiver next year. Linebacker is a position that is hit or miss. There isn't really any stud standing out. Tight end is a position where it's top heavy. You should be able to find your guys here and there, very similar to this year, but it's a position that you really don't always want to be have to spend draft capital on. So with that being said, um, you look at that team, or you look at the landscape of talent. You really wanted to get players in those positions. You wanted to get your center. You wanted to get a tight end. You wanted to get a quarterback, because quarterback is a position that's going to start to level off a little bit. So you better have your guy. That's why I would have been in on the Zach Wilson and Justin Fields sweepstakes as well. I would have called around to see what their price would be, because the dynamic talent that Justin Fields can become is sufficient enough to inquire about. Same with Zach Wilson, because you never know what's going to happen to your starter. They rarely play all 17 games. So you really want to get a backup that you can trust, and also be looking for the future. You always have to be proactive when it comes to that. You want to be proactive, not reactive. So positional potency was something that I brought forth to my 2024 game plan that really just graded this year's A through F, graded this year's positional depth, and then it graded next year's positional depth, which that can always change, especially free agency, draft as well. But then always looking at your future acquisition opportunity. So what is the possibilities? Realistically, where could we finish? Where is our cap space going to be at? Where do we want to allocate funds? And I think, I always, well, I don't always say this, but I always said this about former GM John Robinson, is he's a praying man, because so many times things came into his lap. And I'm like, now I'm thinking of the process, or the thought that GMs have to be some of the most praying people in the world, because this process, or this situation for Rand Carthon, is excellent. He comes into a situation where now he can have his blueprint. He's picking his head coach, his defensive coordinator, a whole coaching staff. He has plenty money, as far as cap space goes. He has top 10 position in rounds for the draft, outside of having a third round pick. Um, things were looking up, and I think the third round pick is something that was given up during his regime, if I'm not mistaken. So you got top 10 picks of each round per se, loosely in general, and then you got all that cap space. Now you can finally have that, leave your mark, leave your DNA on the team. So there's really no excuses. But from a standpoint of how you want to build it, you can go either way. The Titans chose to spend top dollar on Calvin Ridley, a wide receiver, spending top dollar on cornerbacks like L'Jarius Sneed, Chidobe Awuzie. I don't mind them spending that high on Lord Cushenberry. I think it's worth it. Like I said, that's one of the position where you look at my chart, positional potency, where you want to get your guy. But wide receiver and cornerback, these are positions that are always, in cycle. It's a very cyclical position, to where you don't, unless it's like the top guy, you don't have to pay half, like half of $100 million. You don't have to pay $50 million to a guy, because for one, this draft had good depth at wide receiver. Next draft has solid depth, but the free agency process is even bigger with bigger names. Now, the problem with that is, yes, some of those bigger names will more than likely be re-signed or retained, um, in some capacity, right? Resign or retain in some capacity to their old team. But it's just a risky assessment when you're assessing the whole market holistically this year and next. That's why positional potency is so important, that I've learned over the years just from trial and error, that sometimes you get locked into deals because you're not assessing the market the correct way, to where I'm going to pay this guy where, and I'm not, this isn't disrespect to Calvin Ridley, but there's three, four, maybe five Calvin Ridleys out there. And if not this year, they could become Calvin Ridley next year. And then that concerns me with something that I was going to tie in at the end, but I'll go ahead and say it now. What concerns me with that is Calvin Ridley is going to be 30 going into the season. DeAndre Hopkins is already in his 30s and on his last year here, presumably. We don't know. And then Tyler Boyd just signed 30s. So you're getting these wide receivers in their 30s and you have a young quarterback. Eventually, these wide receivers are going to be, I hate to use the word obsolete, but they're either going to be gone or slowing down. And one you've spent a lot of money on. The other, in Tyler Boyd, knows the system, which I think he'll probably be a very early, well, mid-season to late target for Will Levis once he figures out he needs to dink and dunk a little bit more, especially in this offense. But now you're going to be in a position in 1 or 2 years where you were 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Prior to getting D Hop, you're going to be in the same position trying to find young targets to grow with Will Levis. That's the problem with it to me. And I've always been one for, I draft multiple receivers per year when I do my live drafts, or what I would do drafts. And I always, usually draft multiple receivers. But this year, especially, and I'll go over that after this video in my video series of Barnes University draft class. But yeah, for me, it was like at some point, yeah, this is the season to see what Will Levis has. I understand that you're trying to do it as fast as possible. You're on a timetable. It makes sense. But at the same time, you could get some, there were prime opportunity to get some receivers that aren't rookies, that are experienced, like a Noah Brown from Houston, from the Texans. I know that's not the flashy name, but if you look at his statistics, very, very high production for a lesser known prospect. I'm not opposed to the Tyler Boyd signing. I think it was well within financial means, and I think that knowing the offense is going to help him a lot. But yeah, I'm iffy with overspending at the positions of wide receiver and cornerback unless it's your guy. Like, if they feel like that's their guy, that's it. That more power to you. But I lean more towards giving that money to the Jamar Chases of the world, the AJ Browns of the world, as opposed to Calvin Ridley, who great route runner, good speed. I've already done a video about how I feel about his movement skills. I'd love to keep him in a linear role, not too much change of direction. That I don't think that will bode well for how he moves. But yeah, overall, I think that they're definitely stacking their chips all on offensive prowess to see if Will Levis is the guy, and to possibly try to run the table with that. And they're not waiting, and sometimes I feel that I think teams nowadays do rush the process a little bit. But you can't blame them if GMs are hiring and firing at the rate that they are. But I think that this regime has a little grace, a little bit more grace than what they're showing. But anyway, defensively, you know, not to mention, I already said they signed Tony Pollard, but defensively, um, they addressed the position kind of late because they were targeting Calvin Ridley, so they kind of got late to the party on some defensive signings. Was able to get Kenneth Murray. Wanted Frankie Louvu and Willie Gay Jr. to combo those guys to be the starting tandem for the Tennessee Titans. I thought that would be a great fit. You have one guy that is lanky, great blitzer, good short area quickness for coverage, and then you had a guy in Willie Gay Jr. who is a young, stout build guy that can come and definitely be a physical specimen that will bang with offensive linemen, stack and shed, and just run and hit. So that youth would definitely assist that defense. You're not getting someone too old. You're not getting someone who does not fit the job requirements for the position. And then obviously, free agency is a two-way street. So yeah, I wanted these guys is not 100% that they would sign, or if there would be interest. It's really about, what did I say in the description? It's about the framework. It's about the thought process. So just sharing the fact that I'm doing something, to where I'm looking and peeking into the future and just seeing where does it stack. The fact that I'm talking about, positional spending and the future, and then I'm talking about the future of Will Levis moving forward. And we can talk about scheme all day, right? And just hopping back, talking about the offense. We can talk about scheme all day. The Titans are going to be more in 11 personnel. So what's that? A running back, a tight end, 3 receivers. So they're going to be more spread out. That means less tight ends from previous regimes where that tight end would be able to help either side. Now you're pretty much passing the ball more, which is going to lead to more quarterback hits by default, unless obviously you're protecting well. But that could be a problem as well, because it kind of equalizes itself in some way, like it balances itself. If you don't have a great line and you supplement that with tight ends blocking, running backs blocking, boom, you're sacrificing plays downfield. But now you take off tight ends, you take off running backs, and now you're leaving the margin for error to be smaller for linemen to be perfect. It's a balancing act, essentially, especially once the inevitable injuries start. And if they don't, then once again, you've prayed well to whoever you pray to. So it's just a very interesting way to build the way that they went. In summary, I didn't really have a structure to how I was going to explain it, but some of the things and some of the moves that I would have done, Noah Fant, would have signed him because I think that they recently signed Nick Vannett. I think we can all say that Noah Fant is a better tight end than Nick Vannett, to pair with Wiley and Okonkwo, where I think that you can say that Bill Callahan doesn't use tight ends like that, but I think that just having a bigger target that's capable is more important. I think that the Titans want to use Chig the way that they've always used him. I think Wiley is probably going to get better to some degree. He didn't drop passes at Cincinnati. Just had a rough rookie year. So I think they probably feel a little bit more comfortable than they should at tight end. But I definitely would have targeted Noah Fant. So thinking about this is a lot of what went into the Calvin Ridley deal and the L'Jarius Sneed deal. I would have spread out to a little bit more positions. I would have got DJ Reader. I would have got Eric Armstead. I already talked about the linebackers. Would have targeted Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby. Darby has history with Denard Wilson. And then, Kendall Fuller has been one of the top cornerbacks in the league for a while now. And then safety position, Justin Simmons, that's kind of up in the air. That's what I was going to get to. Marcus May has visited the Titans. He has history. So, I just think overall, offensive lineman Cornelius Lucas or Cam Fleming, you can't go wrong as a veteran. That grades very well in pass protection. And then pairing it with the draft in my offseason game plan. And when you do it that early, you're not really sure the value of certain players. That's why that is very tentative. I don't really go by that. I go by my live draft. We already know who the Titans selected. Just did a video series of who the Tennessee Titans selected. And that makes sense to what they want to do. They got a guy in J.C. Latham, already described it. Go check that video out. But roughly, You get a guy that is fit for what they want to do. At that 335, 340, 345 range, low shelf life. But once he gets his hands on players, he can definitely dominate them for a while, hold the point of attack, hold that anchor a little bit better than someone 30 pounds lighter. Defensively, got some reserves, young reserves throughout the process. Got a wide receiver 5, 6, and a punt returner and kick returner in Jaquan Jackson. Then they got their guy, my version of DJ Reader. They got Tavondre Sweat, who can pretty much be identical to what Reader has been able to provide in this league. Longer, probably more batted passes for Sweat. But then there's the off field element. You got the injury element with Reader. And then they finished it off with some edge play and edge guy Jalen Harrell, and then a linebacker who they're going to play James Williams at linebacker, another linebacker, another special teamer. So what I did with that was I would have paid money for Derek Barnett, who ended up re-signing with the Texans. Excellent early down player, going to defend the run and has pass rush potential. I think that's who they see Jalen Harrell to be or to become. I see that as a far away development, but could happen. Who knows? And then as far as adding another just special teamer, and James Williams, um, talking about my free agency, there's stuff that I did in the draft that I want to share in my video series, but I definitely believe in special teams being filled out with veteran players. I'm really big on veteran players who's been in the league, who have become more of a specialist, and really earned their chops in special teams. If I had the choice, I don't necessarily draft. I think it's a luxury to try to draft for special teams players. So, but they may see James Williams as a starter. So it's about your vision and where you see players. But overall, I think that this year the Titans did honestly good. There is no "I told you so" setups. Really, like I said, I do think they're going to pass more. So their MO to protect Will Levis by default will create probably more hits. Not as many hits as he had last year, hopefully not. But by default, because you're not having guys in protection and you're literally passing more, he's going to inevitably get hit more. I think that, they couldn't really do anything about the Derrick Henry situation. I ended up targeting a similar physical prototype or archetype as Derrick Henry and Gus Edwards. That's who I would have targeted. But that's kind of ancillary. It's probably going to be tertiary to when it comes down to this particular team, because they're going to be passing and dumping it off to their running backs. Probably more so than you've seen recently, because they have two running backs with that skill set. And I've always said that you want to have a hammer and you want to have, whatever tool that is swift. You always want to have I learned my lesson with Smash and Dash with Chris Johnson and Lindell White. You want to have that element to the game. And I think that what's overblown is the predictability factor of if Derrick Henry's in the game or Gus Edwards would be in the game, that you're going to run it. And if Tajay Spears is in the game or Antonio Gibson is in the game, is going to be a pass. Well, the thing is, this league is about deception as well. You can work off of that preconceived or pre-thought out knowledge. You can also work off of that. So I think that's overblown as far as when it comes to predictability at the position. So with me not having like a script for this, I don't think I had it last year either. Just me going off the top of the dome. I really think they did a good job. I think that for what they want to do and how they think, I think they maxed it out. I think they didn't deter away from what they believe in. But the pitfalls I see is just the future of building around Will Levis, because I won't say they went all out this year, but because the salary cap is ever growing, so that won't be an issue as much as you would think. But I just think about who after this trio, after Hopkins, Ridley, and Boyd, who are you going to build around Levis? Because I'm looking at who will be available in free agency, who's going to be available in the draft. It's going to be like one of those Buffalo Bills situations where they're just trying to find somebody to suit up next to Josh Allen to play with him, right? I see that situation happening because, like I said, we'll see in my video series of who I would draft and how I keep the cupboards full and how I view the offensive tackle versus wide receiver situation. With that being said, thanks for tuning in all 25 minutes. Once again, hopefully it's got good audio. I know that the video element of it, I cannot see myself talking. So if I wasn't looking in the camera, please excuse that. But thanks for tuning in. I'll see you on the next one.